Howdy, howdy, howdy. It's your Ronfather 916. America's kind of grim right now. It may have been grim for a while. In fact, the world is kind of grim. Last year, I spent time overseas. And I think I mentioned this before, and I'm going to mention it again for the purpose of the story. Um, I went to Europe and I went to Dubai last year. And I'm a news person. I watch the news, I watch every news. Uh, from international news, which is not much of it in this country anymore, because the news divisions, for the most part, are owned by instead of being separate, ABC, NBC, and CBS, which were the networks when I was a child, the news divisions were separate. Now they're part of entertainment, and they have a formula. They start off with a tragedy and end with a soft story. That the hard story, 14,000 people murdered in the mall. And at the end of the story, they tell a nice, happy story right before sports. So I'm in Europe, and first thing I notice, even when I'm seeing stories about, African countries and other, you're not hearing people being killed in numbers that they are in the United States. And in London, at the time I was there, some youngster, I think anywhere between 8 to 11 years old, I don't remember exactly, fell into a trash bin, where they have plastic bags and you throw it in to be picked up. And he fell in and he was smothered. And 2 of the 3 days, that's what they were talking about in Europe. Not mass shootings, not mass stabbings, just that. And sometimes you have to be taken away from you. Once you leave a situation, you don't realize how emotionally that affects you. And I know that because I suffer from depression. And one of my remedies is to travel. So, to see something different. And it gives you that, I can breathe. And oh God, I was depressed or I was upset. And it came over me that I'm really suffering from a form of PTSD. Because every time you look around, someone in mass is being shot, and it's not limited to any place. I mean, there isn't really a safe place in America. Not a school, not a church, not a synagogue, not a temple, not a shopping mall, not a theater, not a gas station, not a supermarket, not a rolling rink, not a bowling alley. And here I was thinking I was living in one of the most civilized countries in America, in the world, and more people are killed here than they are in South and Africa, in Mexico, in the Middle East. You hear politicians talking about the cartels and how they're killing people. Nothing like what's happening in Texas. Nothing was like in Alabama, Oklahoma, and in California, other states. Stand back, stand down. Um, so it's a feeling that I love America. I particularly like California. But there's a part of me that came back and said, it would be nice to take a vacation for a year or so away from this place. I mean, Europe is not perfect. They're paying $11 in gas. Their taxes is much higher than America. Um, the quantities are smaller. Talking about an obese guy. That's your large milk. And where are the 2 liter sodas? Last thing I need is soda. And but the police officers don't carry guns. They do in France, but in Britain, nobody's carrying guns, and the approach is different, and the feeling is different. Oh, they have racism and other isms, but it just feels safer. I'm 67 years old. I just turned 67 last month. I've lived nearly 7 decades. I was a child when the civil rights was ratified. Um, I was around when Roe v. Wade was passed. I was around when women got their rights and tried to ratify the ERA, the Equal Rights Amendment, which is still active from what I understand. Around during segregation 2.0. This is where black and people of color could choose what schools they want to attend. And this time, the and some white people were bused to black schools or people of color. And there were uprising in the East Coast and some parts of California and other parts of the country. Because first we were bused in and they didn't like that, and now they're busting our neighborhoods. And I was around there. And I was around during Stonewall. The Vietnam, I protested during Vietnam and civil rights and all these things in my teens, from the Bay Area. And a lot of people blame me. They said, yeah, you lived in the Bay Area, just a bastion of liberalism. That's why the way you are. But I've survived that. Um, and that's a part of who I am. My mother said life is a wave. What goes out eventually comes back in again. And right now in the Republican Party, and trust me, I'm not citing the Republican Party, but the Republican Party is riding a wave, a counter wave to what's happened in the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years. The average age of members of Congress is 58. I think it's 73 in the Senate. These men are angry. The world changed quickly. This is my theory, by the way. This is not based on any fact. But it moved quickly. It was bad enough that people of color, people who look like me, and people who were not white got all of these rights. The same rights as them. No special rights, but same rights. But before they knew it, gay people got their rights. And so they're after gay people, but the people that they're really aiming towards, well, they're sort of aiming towards all of us. I mean, in some states they're trying to eliminate or rewrite the history of the contributions that people of color have made to this country. It's too delicate for young kids. Um, they're going after the gay community, but the community they're going after, and the most cruel, is women. I've never seen anything like it. So much so that I volunteered to work in women's groups to help get women elected. It doesn't matter for me right now if they're Republicans and Democrats. I understand somewhat how the system works. And I don't believe that most of the women, female Republicans, are voting their heart. They're voting for a promise of power down the road. And since they are a minority within their own group, they're voting with the crowd. And this is what people do in their own communities, unless they close the court curtain. But if somebody finds out that they're voting differently than the rest of the community, they may be outed. They may be what's the word I'm looking for? Isolated. Um, the good bad news. I know this sounds morbid, but I'm not going to be here 30 years from now. It's not likely, and a lot of these elected officials won't be here. Um, and you have people who have lived with Roe v. Wade for nearly 50 years. That's all they've known. And then the world wasn't sucked under. Um, Most of the kids have been around in integration. Most of the kids have been around, they've been exposed to gay people. Older people haven't. It's one of the reasons um, I don't want to live in a mono community. I don't want to live in a neighborhood where everybody looks like me. I love black people. I will always love black people. But in neighborhoods where everybody looks alike, there's a certain amount of ignorance. Because you're not exposed to someone different, you have to rely on the stereotypes and the misinformation that comes in those communities because they're not exposed. And I'm not talking about somebody just working with someone, but I'm talking about someone who's socializing, having a beer, having a meal with that person. There's a big difference. There's a big difference than I have a black friend or I have a white friend. It's the same no matter what race it is. I have a white friend and you relate all to that. No, how do you know that? You have one white friend. And there are hundreds of millions of white people. So how can you say that? Or you have a black friend. It's all too. Where the young kids have exposed me, especially those in their 20s. My kids exposed to gay people, exposed to different people. They don't have the struggles of my generation. They just don't. The ones who are younger than my kids talk about sexuality freely. I'm still learning about binary. I get it wrong. We've explained it to you 1,800 times. We've explained it to you. This is what this mean, and this is what that mean, and I'm pretending. I'm not pretending, but I'm still processing it, and I'm not always getting it. And they have patience with me, but and they talk about their sexuality freely. Where my generation is like, it's like one of our senators in the Carolinas. He hasn't met the right girl. Yes, I'm being shady. Just haven't met her. She exists out there. I think he's my age. He's just hasn't met the right girl. But anyway, I'm gonna leave him alone. I know she's out there. Anyway, I'm so bad. Bad Rottweiler. Um, but at one point, things will return to what my kids and your kids know is normal, and maybe to you, depending on how old you are, what was pre 2023 and 22 will return. But right now, the Republican Party, and I have a Republican friend. There are members of who are older, who are kind of just stuck where they are. The world changed too quickly. And not just Republicans, a lot of Democrats and independents who are in my age neighborhood who haven't been exposed to many gay people. It's like Obama just took a little too far. It's bad enough we had a black president, but he freed the gays. A lot of people still adjusting. There are communities that are like, you're taking a little too far. Because remember, gays are aliens. And it seems like Republican Party is starting with the easy targets, gay people and trans. So trans right now is number one they're going after because people at large don't understand that trans people who were born a man or a woman, who believe or feel they weren't in the right body. These people have been around us for hundreds of years, using the restroom, sharing the restroom space with us without incident. In the late 40s, I think the late or mid 40s, there was a man or lady called Christine Jorgensen. There was a movie about her. She was the first publicized trans person. And I think her operation was taking place in Sweden. You'll look it up and correct me. And this was 1940s, and she was a celebrity. People don't realize, unlike plastic surgery tummy tucks and injections, all that, a person can't go to a surgeon and say, okay, make me a woman or make me a man. It doesn't take place. It takes years of uh, hormonal therapy, psychology, because that operation is permanent. It can't be reversed. One of my groups on Facebook, people are arguing about and saying the world's going to hell and we're all going to burn anytime now. After one man was giving birth, and I went in there because I guess I'm the liberal of the week, and I said this man was born a woman, and while certain things in his body were altered, he's still technically a woman, and he can give birth. And some people went, oh, so Kaiser wasn't creating some type of Frankenstein monster. No, no, Mr. Jenkins, you can be there. There won't be zombies walking around. No, these are real people. You only know what you don't know, and I have patience for people who don't know. I have, and I will, because I want to stay fresh. I hang out with these kids because sometimes I don't want to grow that person going, these kids don't know shit. The world's going to hell on a handbasket. I remember young people who were my age when I was a kid going, these young kids don't know shit. I don't want to be that person. I'm not that person. And I'm educated by other people. And I'm not closed off to new ideas. Just because I don't understand it doesn't mean it's wrong. It means I don't understand. For me, that's pure and simple. Now, if you want to have a discussion, I don't necessarily like talking politics, but if you want to talk about gays, you want to talk about people of different colors and background, cultures, and different and uh, different hues. I love meeting new people because it allows me to understand who they are. They're not aliens because they eat different than we do, but they have the same problems we do, no matter how much money they have, no matter, because when I was growing up, black people say, well, they don't have it because they didn't go through what we went through. White parents had problems with the same as what their black parents had. They went through it with their teenagers. Well, it just wasn't like us because, they're white. Well, there are advantages. I'm gay. Yeah, there is privilege. They don't realize they have privilege. So a lot of people of color don't realize that. This is how it's always been. There are some who do, particularly white women, but that's a different video. That's a different video. That's a different subject, and we'll talk about that later on. Um, if you look over the tears of a white woman, I wrote that, and I think you can find that on Google. You can Google that under um, actually a few places. Of course, my old blog, Sacred Tomatoville Post, you can find that one. But all in all, we're the same. They don't realize it. Not all. Some do, but not all. But moving on. Um, because people don't understand trans, they're the easiest. And that's why you see now state after state is going to the easiest target, the lowest. Then they're going to gay people and trans drag queen, which is just baffles me. I was picked up by a lady in the Uber, and she said, it's so terrible what they're doing to these children. Schools are forcing them to learn how to be gay. I said, ma'am, that's not true. Every school district by the state has a curriculum. They can't go and say, okay, we're going to add this to the curriculum. There was a time, again, because you rely on people's ignorance. There was a Briggs initiative in California where they were trying to get every gay person, I believe, who had a job of teacher, every teacher who was gay in California, this is in the 1990s, I believe, fired. And the subtext was they're teaching your children how to be gay. And it failed, thank goodness. Um, a lot of misinformation. My son, we came in Sacramento, I took him to a library in Sacramento, where drag queens were telling a story. There were no cards to fill out. When you turn 18, we'll teach you how to apply makeup. Parents were required to go, and it was an entertaining version of Little Red Riding Hood. I mean, she put on a full act. Now, forget that, Barry Humphries, who played Edna, entertained dignitaries all over the world. Milton Berle became a star in the 40s in drag. Come up to the 70s and 80s, you had Flip Wilson and other people in drag. But now you have the Proud Boys and the Klan going out and saying, you are ruining the kids. No, I'm sorry. Priests attack kids, boys and girls. Boy Scout leaders. Married men raped young boys and girls. Look it up. Look it up. I challenge you. How many drag queens attacked youngsters? Point something. But that fact doesn't matter. They're destroying the framework of the country and destroying our youth. Doesn't have to make sense. Doesn't have to make sense. And now gay people are next. Gay people are easy because for baby boomers it's just too fast. Got it. I'm a baby boomer. I got it. It went too fast. I mean, during the Obama administration, it went from a notion to reality. Didn't take 50 years, and they blame him. So that's what happens to you, black president. And you have to understand, Obama wasn't pro-gay. It's interesting. And the worst group right now is just women. It's beyond mean. That's why I have volunteered. I have traveled from different states to help get women elected. For almost 50 years, women have been able to make the choice, a difficult choice for them and their families. And men who will never experience childbirth, wouldn't have a care, and don't really give two shits, have decided not only can they not have an abortion under any circumstance, but we're going to penalize anyone who helps them. And we're going to and forget that the doctors and nurses have taken some Hippocratic oath. We're going to fine you or take away your license, the ability to work in your profession. In half the states, for the majority population, women are the majority in the United States. Not by a huge margin, but the reality is they are the majority and they are the most penalized. I have a daughter. If you don't have a daughter, you have a niece. You have a female cousin. You have a female friend. If they were pregnant, if they were pregnant and that the child or the fetus that we're carrying could kill them, in 24 states die. And the people who sign that into law are going to church and they're praying for the people of Ukraine. And the people, but not praying for the immigrants. We want them to die at the border. But those other people, we want those women and anybody helps them die. I think I had a ludicrous this week. Idaho said that if you try to go to Washington or some other state, we're going to prevent that from happening. Ludicrous, but mean and cruel. Washington, the state of Washington, which is next door to Idaho, said, "You're welcome. Come in. Come on in. Move it right along. Move it right along." But Idaho, come on. Now, bad news is a lot of these politicians will die in the next 20 years, but how many women will die and suffer in the meantime? Back in the 50s and the 40s, black organizers, when Rosa Parks and other people couldn't sit where they wanted to sit, even though they made up the majority of the people who took the bus in those communities, broke the bus companies by boycotting them. Boycotting has been effective in this country. When I was a kid, I think I was in junior high, the whites in South Africa, who made a vast majority, were treating the indigenous people, the people who were born there, as fourth-class citizens, killing them, putting them in jail. I can't, my brain just shut down, but you know who I meant, the leader. He was in jail, I think, for 20 years. His brain, you know who I'm talking about. And what students did and recommended that taking a page from the civil rights leader saying, you know what? We've been saying this for years and our government's doing nothing. So we're going to the companies and we're saying, you know what? If you conduct business with South Africa, we will boycott your product. We will boycott your product, Coca-Cola in the States, Texaco in the United States. We're going to boycott your product. Women can do that here in the United States. I feel bad for those red states, and I'm not painting every Republican as evil. Please believe me. I understand politics. It was something I was involved in for many years. The women who voted, Republican women who are minority in their own party, voted so with the promise of gaining power. Because if they voted their conscience, what would happen? They would have no influence in that party. Because it's about power. So I want to help women get elected. I think that's across the board. More women in the Democratic Party. They can prevent this from ever happening again. The majority of citizens, the majority of the citizens in this country, females are underrepresented. They are majority. There are more females than males in this country, and they still, in some places, make up no more than 20%, or in the Republican, much less, point something, or maybe 5 or 6%, leaving them powerless. This is old news. This is not reinventing the wheel. This is old news. Black people went in, started locally, and moved up. And now they have a large tribe. In California, Hispanics. In New Mexico, Hispanics. In Texas, you make fun of California, but any day now you will be a blue state. Any day now. Florida's not far behind. The Republican Party, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, means nothing to anybody, is lazy. You need to open the tent. You need to listen. You need to go into the community and listen to Hispanics, not just in 2024, in 2021, and find out their needs. sell them and tell them why they should become a Republican. Go to the black community and talk to black community. You're not going to be well received, but you keep going back because there are a lot of young black men who are not all that enamored with the Democratic Party. This is true in Hispanic community and other communities. But the Republicans are basically saying, we're not going to compromise and we're not going to hear you. If you want to be a Republican, you'll have to accept it or reject it. And guess what? Happening to white, educated whites who grew up with black people, who grew up with gay people, who grew up with transgender people. They're not baby boomers my age. They've been exposed to other people and other cultures. And they're going, if I join this party right now, I'm insulting my friends. I'm hurting my friends, people I grew up with. The Republican Party doesn't want to open that tent. I don't understand why. Because their tent is getting smaller and smaller. See, anybody who's watched these videos, I'm not a fan of Republicans or Democrats. I think there should be like 3-4 parties. They're too similar. But I'd rather have a Republican Party that appeals to everybody than what we have in the state of California, my home state, which I love, where the Republican Party basically took themselves. They didn't read the room that Hispanics are a large part of the state of California. But the Republican parties went after Hispanics in California. Said if you're illegal and can't prove that you're here, you can't go to school. You can't get medical services. You're not a part of society. Even if you're born, if you can't prove you cannot take advantage of our services. And it passed. And then the Supreme Court overturned it. Meanwhile, the Hispanic community grew and took political offices. And right now, the Republican Party, which was just a mighty office in the state of California, have no power here. So California's out of balance. Out of balance. And I don't think it's going to return until one section of the Republican Party says we need to open this tent up. We need to go out because a lot of black people don't realize that for years, majority of black people were Republicans, the party of Lincoln. Democrats didn't want us until the late 60s. They didn't want us. They were against integration in the southern states in the 60s. They didn't want us. We were safe and welcome the Republican Party. That changed during Goldwater. That changed. Somebody will correct me if I'm wrong, but that changed. And the Republican Party opened the door in the mid-60s to black people. And within a few years, those black Republicans switched over to the Democratic Party, and they haven't come back. You cannot tell Republican Party that you want all these immigrants to go to hell when a large part of the largest minority group in the United States are Hispanic. You cannot say you're welcome to my group, but meanwhile, we don't want those people who are related to you. You can't tell black people that you're welcome here, but meanwhile, the black neighborhoods should be taken over. They're trying to do that now in Houston and Jackson, Mississippi. The states are trying to take over the government and run the city. That happened in Flint. Flint was no accident, it was deliberate. They redirected the water, I believe it was the Detroit River, to a river they knew was polluted. That wasn't. I think that was Governor Snyder at the time in Michigan. That wasn't an accident. So the people of Flint, they don't live in a different country and cut off from the rest of the state. Black people knew what was happening, just as Hispanics know what's happening and Asians know what's happening. So, Republican Party, if you want to survive, you're gonna have to open that tent. I hope you do. I'm an equal opportunity abuser. Equal opportunity abuser. I don't think the Democrats got it all under control, but they're more accommodating to the average person than you are. Because right now you're on an attack and burn mission, which you will pay for. I mean, you've lost several elections here since the era of Trump, and right now you're questionable. I don't think the Democrats are all that, and I've said many times on these podcasts and my videos that I don't see much difference. It's Jiffy or Jiffy or Jiff. I don't see much difference. But if one party, I don't want to see the Republicans in control, and I don't want to see the Democrats, because essentially have one party, and I see what's here in California. I love this state. I particularly love Sacramento, and it's integrated. I never thought I'd live here. I thought once my kids were grown, I'd be in another place. But I really like the mix of people here. We seem to get along. But it's tilted. It's tilted. I think they do too much to corporations here. I think, and that's the liberal side. And if we had a strong Republican Party here, that would be balanced. Now, I don't think California is dead. I don't think that at all. There are 39 million people here. Contrary to popular belief, only in the last 2 years of 400,000 people, it's still 39.9 something here. So Texas got a long way to go. They've got 10 million people to catch up with us. It will happen because the cost of living is lower. But California will still be a giant, as in New York has, with a smaller population. Because when I was a kid, New York was number one population. This is probably the longest video I've done, at least on this channel. I think there should be protest for women's rights, for gay rights. I think we need to look at those companies in 4 states, Texas, Georgia, Alabama, and South Carolina, where our companies are moving to. And we need to put pressures on those companies to put pressure on the government, saying, listen, half our employees are women. If you don't ease these, a percentage of our population is also gay. So unless you ease these out, we're not going to buy your product. It's happening in France right now. Downside of economic capitalism. If they don't buy our products, we're not going to stay in your state. We're not going to hold that position. We're not going to support what you're doing. And no one can affect the movement like corporations, business. Something to think about. Want to argue with me? You know I like a good argument. I want to hear your side. But if you're gay, if you're transgender, if you think this thing about drag queens is crazy, which I believe it is, and if you're a woman who don't necessarily can afford to leave your state, let's put pressure on those businesses and saying, listen, this is what your state is doing to my daughter, to my wife, to other females in my family. And we will not do business with those businesses who supports the state practices, the practice of this cruel abortion laws. Because what's sad about this, what is really sad about this, these red states are poor already. Most of them are supported by the rest of the United States, by our taxes in Minnesota, taxes in Florida, taxes in Oregon, Washington, and New York, and Boston. A lot of these people are underserved by the medical community. In the nation as a whole, there's a shortage of doctors and nurses in every state, but more so in the poor states. And now, should they operate or have to protect the life of a woman because she has carrying a fetus that could kill her, or in some cases carrying a fetus that doesn't have a skull, they could lose their license. Or in other cases, let the woman die. Let's turn the chapter of the Bible and let's pray for all those people, not the people that we voted to hurt and be mean to. We're going to vote for those other people. That's Christian, right? Or whatever religion. Most of them have the same love and helpful to the neighbors. I don't know. Even the Bible has moments of cruelty, but not this type of cruelty. The Quran doesn't have this type of cruelty. But members of the U.S. House and Senate, they do. I'd like to hear your thoughts. This is Rod, Father. On this channel, this is my record number one in terms of time, 43 minutes. If you've hung in with me, I really appreciate it. I really want to hear what you have to say. Hit that like button if you're watching these videos and you like what you hear. Even if I piss you off just a little bit, just a itty little bit, hit that subscribe button. But I really want to hear what you have to say. Longest one in history. I'll hope to be shorter, I promise. Wishing you love, joy, peace, and happiness. It is a choice. This is a Rod, Father. I'm out.